Hello my loves, and welcome back to another episode on my channel. This time we'll be talking all about my unmedicated hospital birth. I don't know why unmedicated is something that I can't properly say right now. It's early in the morning, baby woke me up at 6 a.m. but I wanted to sit down and talk to you guys. She's just sleeping over here. I finally got her to go down and sleep. But I feel like this whole unmedicated hospital birth thing is something that's quite big right now, and not even something that's quite big right now. I mean, hospital birth and having a medicated birth is something new. I feel like something good to remember as we start this video is that hospital births are not like the standard. We started off birthing at home, in a village, with, women around us, and just having it be a more natural, innate experience versus what we're being drawn to right now and kind of, in a way, forced into. Don't want to be like, spilling all the tea and whatever, but I do feel like it's something that has become a lot more common, and that now people are thinking that it's unsafe to birth at home, or that it's unsafe to be birthing in general, which in my opinion is innate. So as we start off this video, just know that that's my viewpoint and that that's my opinion that I have definitely thought about for the duration of 9 very, very long months. But let's start at the start, because I got pregnant last year, October, and our pregnancy wasn't an expected pregnancy. We were pregnant unexpectedly. I mean, it wasn't that we didn't want to be, let's say. We were not opposed to the idea, but I was thinking, and we were thinking, that it was going to be down the line, maybe 2 or 3 years from now. But we just happened to get pregnant. And because of that, it was quite a big shock to my nervous system to find out that I was pregnant. The initial stages of me finding out, I was shocked. I was just kind of a bit numb. I didn't really know how to process the information. My body was just overwhelmed by the amount of emotions that just suddenly came into it, and also the change that just started to happen within my brain and that would happen within our life. And at that time, we had literally just moved countries. So we moved from Croatia to Spain. My partner's from Croatia. We together decided that we were going to try living in Barcelona, and we had just packed up our stuff, moved everything with us, including a couch that I didn't want to let go of, and had just gotten to our Airbnb in Barcelona, or Costa del Fels, because we were not staying in Barcelona, we were staying around Barcelona. And at that moment, we were over there for about a week, when I was like, oh, my period is gonna come soon, nothing is going on, it's gonna come. I have cramps, I have pimples, my skin is breaking out. It's all the signs that I would have for my period coming, on a normal day. And my partner was like, well, let's get a pregnancy test, let's just check to be sure. And I was like, yeah, sure. I've done a billion pregnancy tests over this lifetime, because I tend to be a little bit on the anxious side of things, I suppose. So I'm always like, well, better check, make sure that nothing is going on. And this time was, in my opinion, going to be the same thing of me getting a pregnancy test, just overreacting. And then I peed on the stick, and there were 2 lines, and I was telling my partner, there's a line, and he was like, oh, 1 line, that's good, you're not pregnant. And I was like, no, honey, 1 additional line. And that was how we found out. And I said to him, oh, my period is gonna come in 2 days or something, it usually doesn't tend to be super on the same day every single month, or super specific. I was using natural cycles at the time, but I have to admit that I didn't use it as I should have used it. When there were red days, I was kind of assessing. And this is funny, because I had just bought an Apple Watch in order to track my basal temperature, started using that, and I figured that I'd already been doing this thing, because I had been using at the time natural cycles for over 2 years, and I never had any problems, nothing ever happened. And then at that point with my partner, somehow, I mean, I'd gotten overconfident in my ability to read what was actually going on and to know when my ovulation was happening, and I kind of miscalculated or read the signs, and that led to us becoming pregnant. Obviously, before I got pregnant, I have to say that I was absolutely terrified of giving birth, to the point of me fearing that I was going to die giving birth, and that's quite intense. I would say that that's probably not very common, but maybe it has something to do with having heightened levels of anxiety, or just generally, not being very familiar with this thing. And I feel like I've never really been around anyone who, I've never taken witness or been a witness of a birth, or no one ever really talked about birth in my circle, which is another reason why I really wanted to do this video, because I feel like we should have these conversations, and it should be normal to talk about like our birth preferences and like the innateness of it and the beauty of it, really. So I was very unfamiliar with birth, and I was terrified. That is how I started off. I didn't really have any preference as to like natural, hospital, medicated birth or whatever, because I just never been informed, and I really didn't know what I was talking about at that point. I just was terrified, and I didn't even know anything about birth. So that was the point where I kind of started to, well, not immediately, because I feel like the shock had to kind of wear off before I started investigating and figuring out what I really wanted. And I ended up hiring a doula who also educated us on a bunch of things, but we'll get more into that later on. So the shift from me being terrified of birth to me being 100% confident in my ability and my body's ability to birth a baby really came from like informing myself through, the internet, I suppose in this case, and learning different things about our bodies and about birth and like pain management, and making that decision for myself that I wanted to have a natural birth really was one that was big to me. It was so important, and it was really like one of the points where, I don't know, I just felt like I had this innate, like an insane confidence in myself, and knowing, like I think I opened up to the knowing that our bodies are meant to give birth. And this is something that I heard on a podcast as well, but more or less in the statement of everyone had to be born. Everyone has been given birth to. My mother gave birth to me, your mother gave birth to you. We all had to be birthed. And I think that that is something that we sometimes forget. And we naturally have been created in order to be able to manage the pain of birth, to be able to withstand like whatever we're going through in that moment. And I think it was just like an aha moment, like where a light bulb turned on in my head, and I was like, yeah, of course, like I'm 100% all about like natural practices and living life in the most like intuitive way. So how is it that I'm terrified to give birth when it's the most intuitive and natural thing that, exists? And I think it's the idea of pain that really stops us. Personally, I have quite a high pain tolerance, which you'll hear about later on in the story as well. And I feel like me being terrified of it, like kind of just was me not trusting myself or trusting my body in the process of giving birth, which after watching many videos, like I started to try to get comfortable watching videos of other women give birth and just learning things about like the physiology of birth and like what happens in the body and the stages that you go through in labor, and like, what the cycles are, I suppose, when you're giving birth. And I feel like that really helped me, like to see that other women were able to give birth even peacefully or orgasmically, as many people would like to call it. I feel like that enabled me to like open my mind up and be like, okay, well, this can look different as well. It doesn't have to look like the movies where everyone is just like, going mental, which, let's be real, it kind of looked like that for me. I wasn't like all peace and light and love, but I generally am not anyways. Leo in my chart. But as I started to get more familiar there, I just felt a lot more confident and like capable, and I knew that something was coming and that something was going to happen whether I liked it or not, and I was 100% capable of giving birth. So I think that step one to just becoming more confident is finding that like trust in yourself, where you're like, okay, like my body is made for this. We all had to be born. I can do this. Other women have done this as well. And obviously, if you choose to have a medicated birth, that's like 100% your choice. Or if you go in thinking that you want to have a natural birth, but in the end you do end up having a medicated birth, honey, like it's all good. Like everything is fine. Like whatever happens, whatever choice you do make, I think that the most important thing is just to be informed and to allow yourself to open up to the possibility. So like I said, we decided to hire a doula, or really I decided to hire a doula because I was like, I would love to be more informed. I would love to be supported in a certain way. And it was an amazing experience to have someone there who had witnessed other people giving birth and who kind of instilled this confidence even more, which at this point I felt like I was pretty confident already, but I loved like the concept of making birth more of a ritual versus it being like a medical event, because I think I wanted to really 100% shift from that idea that it's a medical event, which hiring a doula really allowed me to change that perspective even more, and to, you know, be calm within myself and know that everything was good and everything was okay. If it was up to me, I would have given birth at home. Unfortunately, in Croatia, that's not really a thing. You don't really give birth at home here. You're not allowed to, which is a little bit stupid, especially, you know, as someone coming from the Netherlands. I feel like, you know, we're quite acceptable towards giving birth at home, and if you're in the hospital you leave within a day. Here there's like a mandatory rule that you have to stay in the hospital for like 3 days. So all in all, I really feel like the decision to hire a doula was great. She taught us a lot of things about like pain management, or how to be more comfortable, or how to relieve like a little bit of pressure from the belly, how to connect more together and have my partner. And I think that this was a really important thing for us, is that my partner also was informed a lot more, and he just generally, you know, got to be in the position where he also felt confident, which was amazing when we were at the hospital, because he was able to really support me in that time and to enable like this element of, okay, I can do this myself. Like we were really connected in that moment of like, okay, we're gonna do this together. I'm gonna give birth to our baby. He's gonna be there to support me. We both agree on this. He was like, I trust you 100%. I was like, you know, in that moment, I trusted him 100%. I did hear him say that I cussed him out a little bit while I was in labor. But honestly, who can blame us when we're going through a situation like this? But having the doula was also massively like helpful for my partner to just be more informed, to feel more confident in that as well. I think that that really allowed him to feel like he was a part of it. Most of my sessions with the doula were by myself, and we did things such as like a mother blessing, which was really, really beautiful. And I feel like having a doula as well, in this case, like our doula really was more of a caretaker. So she helped me, and like in the process of me giving birth, she was there to come with us to the hospital. She couldn't stay, unfortunately, but I think especially the prep part of like pre-labor and like before stages were really, really lovely for me, where I got to soak my feet in a foot bath and like really feel taken care of, because I think pregnancy, especially for me, was quite heavy. And I think that that whole like beautiful energy of letting another woman, especially, like I think it's such a beautiful like bubble energy when it's like other women being able to take care of you in that time. And like she was really there to like nurture and foster this like, you know, new mom becoming shift from maiden to mother. And I really, 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 really valued that. And I feel like it's something that I would 100% do again. As we got into labor, you know, stages, my labor actually started in the middle of the night. I think it was around 3 or 4 a.m. when I started having contractions. But to be fair, I didn't really know that they were contractions I actually said to my partner, oh, I think maybe I'm getting like some kind of stomach flu, or I feel like I'm getting a little bit sick, and you know, let me just go to the toilet. And then, hi Chino. I'm Chino. Yes, so I initially thought that I had some kind of stomach flu, and I was like, you know, something is happening. Like, I had already been having Braxton Hicks for maybe about 2 months at that point. So I don't know. I wasn't 100% sure. Obviously, I'd never been in labor before, so I didn't know what it would feel like or what I would feel like. So at that point, I think around 6 a.m. I woke up again, and I was telling my partner like, oh, I'm really feeling crampy, and he was like, okay, just go back to sleep, honey. And I was like, okay. So I went back to sleep, and then I think we woke up around 8 or 9, and I was noticing that I was having like some kind of contractions, but I wasn't sure if it was Braxton Hicks or not, because in my head contractions had to be timed like specifically apart. Whenever people say like, oh, if your contractions are like 5 minutes apart or 2 minutes apart, I was thinking to myself, oh, that means that consistently it's going to be every 2 minutes, not like the average of the contractions is going to be like between every 2 minutes. So some of my contractions would be like 5 minutes apart at that point, some would be 7, some would be 10. And I was thinking, okay, like on average, I think I was having them every 5 minutes or so. And I don't know, that wasn't like, I didn't think that that was me actually going into labor. I thought maybe it's false labor, Braxton Hicks, something along the lines, which in case any of you don't know, contractions don't have to be like set like 5 minutes apart. It's more about more or less the average of like 5 minutes between contractions. Sometimes it can be 7, sometimes it can be less, sometimes it can be more. On that day, I had an appointment with our gynecologist at 11. So I was like, okay, well, you know, we'll just wait it out until we go to the gynecologist, and then she'll tell us if we're in labor or not. Which then we, you know, went to our appointment at 11, and in between I feel like the contractions got a little bit heavier, and I was like, okay, like, maybe like this seems to be like getting more intense. Sometimes I would have to like just, you know, take a moment and stand there, but I was like, perhaps it's still false labor. I'm also completely delusional sometimes. So we got to our appointment, and I was telling her that I was having contractions. So she was like, okay, let me see if you're dilated at all. And then she was like, yeah, like, I think I was like 5 or 6 centimeters dilated at that point. She's like, you're ready to go to the hospital. And I was like, are you saying like ready, or like, you know, she's like, don't go to the beach and then go to the hospital, like go to the hospital immediately. And I was like, We got in the car, and I said to my partner, let's go home. You know, I just want to relax a little bit more. I just want to, you know, really like zone in. And I'm gonna put a video here. As you can see, like I was pretty relaxed, and I was just in my zone, and I just feel the most comfortable being at home. Preferably, like I said, I would have given birth at home or in the car or somewhere else, because the whole situation of like going to the hospital just made everything a little bit more stressful for me. But I still stayed at home. Our doula came over. We were at home for another like 3 or 4 hours. Then I got to the hospital, and I have to say that the most important thing when you're having a hospital birth is that you are properly informed. You know what you want, you have your birth plan, you're able to communicate your needs. And it's a bit difficult because you're obviously in like a portal time, like a very intense time in your life, and the emotions are very intense, and you're very like I would say influenceable in the time of giving birth. But I knew what I wanted, and I said to myself, okay, unless there is a medical emergency and a medical reason why we need to do certain procedures, I am going to put my foot down and have a natural birth. I'm going to do everything in order to make it as easy as possible for my body, for myself, and just, you know, make it a more pleasant experience versus it being like a medical event. So we got to the hospital. I brought my own pajamas. Unfortunately, they didn't let me wear my pajamas, and I previously had a little bit of a traumatic experience at the hospital with a prior checkup. So the energy for me shifted a little bit, and I felt like all of that relaxation that I had, all of the chill that I built up, all of the, you know, being super zen in my body, it was just gone with the wind. And I started to become a little bit more anxious. My partner had to stay down as I went up in the hospital, this is all like Croatia practices. Unfortunately, I feel like it's quite common for things to go like that here, and my birth is on the less, like traumatic side of the spectrum, which I still think that some things that they did were not okay and should never, ever, ever have happened. But there's not much that you can do over here except for just be like, well, okay, it's fucked up, and have conversations with other women about it. So we arrived to the hospital. My husband had to stay downstairs. They took my medical details and they did another CTG scan to see if everything was okay with the baby. Everything seemed to be okay. Everything was good. So then they brought me to the room, and Envision in Croatia, they don't have the same rooms as we do in the Netherlands or anywhere in the US. They kind of have this like open box theory where you're in a room with like 3 walls and the front wall doesn't exist. It's basically just open. So there are like multiple boxes next to one another and everyone is giving birth there. So they brought me to one of these. They were like, okay, we're gonna do like an enema. And I was like, oh, can I do that myself? Because I had read into this a little bit beforehand and I knew that it was common practice here. And then they were like, no, we're gonna do it for you. And I was like, okay. I mean, that was a mistake. That was the big mistake that I made. I would say that there are not many mistakes that I made, but this was a big mistake. Like I should have just like put my foot down there and been like, okay, no, like in case anyone is thinking about it, especially if you're already pretty far along in labor, having an enema is just unnecessary. It's like ancient practice. It's not the vibe, and I don't care. Like if I would have shit, I would have shit. Like to be fair, in that time, you just don't give a shit. Anyone who's worried about shitting themselves, do not be worried. You are gonna be out of consciousness. You will not, recall, remember anything. It's just gonna be somewhere over there and no one is gonna be bothered by it. It's really not embarrassing. It's just, birth. But over there they did decide to give me an enema, so I got one done. Then they were like, okay, you're gonna like go to the toilet now, then walk for an hour, go to the toilet again, and then your partner can come up. So they like bring me over to the toilet, and there's like a toilet and a shower, and I'm like flushing out, and my whole body I think was in that moment just in shock. I think that before it was still gradual and everything was building up slowly, but because of the enema it kind of interrupted like the natural process of me like really sinking into birth and like letting it come over me. I feel like we shouldn't be playing with that because there's like a natural like upskill so that you can manage it with pain tolerance and everything. But this was really a hit for my body. I had a bit of a panic attack in that moment because it was so intense. There was so much intensity all at once. I took off my clothes, went into the shower box that they had there, and I kind of just like rinsed myself off. If you know me, you know that I have pretty intense periods, and whenever I would have pretty intense periods, I would go over to the shower to just like rinse myself off. And this was like, really like cleansing myself and like getting back into my zone and everything. So I did that and I tried to kind of regulate myself. I was also on the phone with my partner. Unfortunately, I was not able to 100% regulate myself. I went to the toilet again. There was a bit of blood, and that freaked me out even more because as a first timer I was like, what the fuck, like what is happening? Again, blood, like a little bit of blood is quite normal when you're like going into labor, because there's like a bloody show or whatever you want to call it, which happens. Obviously it's very like scary, you think that something's going wrong, but generally everything should be fine if it's like just a little bit of blood, which it was. Then they picked me up, brought me to the room, then my partner could come. At this point we had already had like such a frustrating encounter with nurses at the hospital and them not allowing my partner to come up, and me being really like out of it, really anxious, really like I was wired. So I feel that they definitely could have handled that better. My partner was really frustrated with them, also got a little bit angry at that point, which in some ways I think that makes sense and is necessary at that point, because I feel that it's crucial for them to take you seriously. And we had discussed it previously as well, a lot of the times that this was going to be a bit of a challenge, especially giving birth in a hospital over here. But he was allowed to come up to my room. I was there. he then started to really support me, and this is kind of where I'm fading in and fading out. I went, you know, between worlds, as you might say, and he was really able to support me there. There were a few things that I wanted to be fully naked and stuff. I don't know. I was like, can I take off this dress? And I was, and he would ask them, and they'd be like, no. And I'd be like, can I, like, you know, about like monitoring the baby. Basically, they were like, okay, we have to do a continuous CTG because you're too far along the process. And I was like, okay, like I wanted to do intermittent, but I was able to, or I was willing to kind of bend on that one because I wasn't like set. I was just like, okay, put it in a way that I can move around. And they were like, oh no, we want you on the bed. And I was like, I'm going to move around. This is going to happen. Like, just figure out a way to do it, because that's what I know is best for me. I know is best for my body and the progression of this labor. So, you know, that's going to happen, which is amazing. Like, moving around was the best thing that I could have done. I feel like, you know, changing positions so many times and like, you know, really being able to follow what my body was telling me was really, really, really helpful at that time. I think that this was something that, you know, definitely changed my labor experience, being able to move around and like progress it in the most natural way possible. Now, by the time that active labor came along, I was kind of exhausted. And I think that's because I got the enema and everything, so my body really had went through a shock. So I decided to lay down on my back, which I didn't expect. Like, going into labor, I thought that I would have wanted to be like, you know, in cat-cow or whatever you want to call it, like on all fours, or, you know, standing up so that gravity could help a little bit. But I decided to lay on my back, and that was nice. I did, you know, end up not, like, when you're extending your legs, like your knees outwards, you're closing the hips, which is something that I learned in my research. And when you're putting your knees inwards, you're opening up the hips. So I did end up like closing my hips and having them touch, which was really, really, really helpful. They kind of tried to open them up, and I would just put them back. I closed the motherfuckers again. I was like, I'm going to open these hips up. This baby is coming out. So then we're getting more into like, okay, this is becoming serious. Like, pushing labor is going to commence soon. They were recommending that I get an episiotomy, and I asked them, okay, what are, like, you know, the pros and cons of having this done? And then basically they said, oh, if you don't get one, then you can rip from front to back. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's not really legitimate, like, medical reason. Like, you're not indicating that something is going on with my birth. So I ended up signing a waiver to not get that done. They also wanted to give me something like Pitocin, or like, you know, something along the lines to like speed up labor. I was like, okay, I think labor is going fast enough. I got to the hospital at 3 p.m. and I gave birth by 6 p.m. So I wasn't concerned at all at that point, because maybe it was like 5 p.m. So I was like, okay, you know, labor is coming along smoothly. I have no reason to like speed it up or anything. So I also declined kindly. They didn't take so kindly to that, but that wasn't my priority, and it wasn't my business. Then when pushing labor started, I was kind of like in the space of not really knowing what to do, because as I've learned, there's like, you know, breathing the baby out, which is something that I tried, but I wasn't quite sure exactly how. They kind of say it's the same, you know, as when you poop and then you breathe it out instead of pushing. That ended up being something that was a little bit confusing for me. If I had the support of someone who had, you know, supported someone else in like breathing the baby out instead of pushing the baby out, I think that would have, you know, changed things a lot. But because I was in company of people who were, you know, more of the pushing than breathing, I was like, okay. Then they said, okay, you're gonna take a deep breath and then you're gonna, you know, push, which in the end I did do that. And I think that was fine. So then, you know, baby comes out. It wasn't that many pushes. It was really, you know, by the time that she came out, I was like, oh my God. I think I was in shock. But happy shock, you know, like, oh my God, she's here. Oh my God, this is so unreal. Oh my God, what an experience. So she ended up coming out. I was, before I gave birth, concerned about birthing the placenta, which in the end, honestly, like that was the thing to be the least concerned about. The placenta is like a wobbly sack of like nothingness, so it just, you know, flops out. You give like a push and it gets out. And but I heard like birthing the placenta, and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to birth the placenta after I birth my baby. I'm going to be dead. But all of that was fine. I ended up ripping just a little bit internally, which is something that they could have left as is, but they decided to just do a few stitches, which I didn't really like get bothered by that or anything. I was like, the lady who stitched me up was actually so nice and making conversation. She was one of the nicest nurses or, you know, medical personnel that we encountered at that point. So I was like, yeah, stitch me up. But the ripping part wasn't painful. I didn't really, I don't know, I didn't have any problems. And then baby was born. We decided to do delayed cord clamping, which is when, you know, the blood like goes through the umbilical cord and you kind of wait until you cut it off. So we did that, which was also beautiful and amazing. I'm really glad that we did do that. We also decided not to wash her after she was born. This is something that we did have to indicate, and they were like, we have to wash her, and we were like, no. We also decided to not give any, we had to give vitamin K because we didn't get the waiver like notarized in time or whatever, because we kind of randomly went into labor. I was expecting to actually go into labor late because she was my first baby. I didn't expect her to be early, which she was a bit early. I thought she would stick around for a little bit longer, but she didn't, which was okay. Like, she came at the perfect time. But yes, that was the only vaccine or like, you know, shot that we got because we just simply couldn't not get it. Like, in the end, there was a possibility for us to delay that, but they didn't tell us that. So things just ended up happening. We kind of put our foot down on the washing. I was in the hospital for 2 more days, I think it was. In the end, I did tell them, like, I discharged myself because I didn't feel very good in the hospital. I just wanted to be home. It was such a shock, like being in the hospital after giving birth and the whole birth experience. And in Croatia also, your partner can't be there. They can only come in like these visitors hours and everything. So I was like, I want to be home. I want to be in my bubble. I know that's what's best for me. So I had to advocate for myself again. I was requesting them, you know, to let me know, like, for the pediatrician, is my baby healthy? He was like, yeah, but she could get jaundice tomorrow, da 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 da. And I was like, well, she can't get jaundice like after we get discharged, like 1 day later. So, you know, is she currently healthy? And he was like, yes. And I was like, okay. So in that case, I would like to discharge, you know, me and baby, and for us to just go home, because I know that's what's best for my mental health, and just, you know, for me to have this peace of mind and to start to actually bond with her. Because up until that point, I feel like we were connected naturally, but I didn't feel like I'd actually gotten the time to really like slow down and like calm myself and like bond with baby and give myself a little bit of time and be in my bubble and to be happy. I just really didn't feel good being in the hospital. So ended up discharging ourselves. We went home, and oh my god, best choice in my life, first of all, but also second of all, like when I got home, I was like, yes, you know, now we really got to fully heal. Hi baby, I'm talking about you. Somebody woke up and not that happy, which is okay, but it ended up being the best thing. And once we were home, I really got to settle in. I feel like bonding didn't happen 100% immediately, but it definitely happened like over time. I'm absolutely in love with my baby. I feel like my natural response to just everything that happened, you know, in birth and like in the hospital, was kind of to shut down initially. So if that's your experience too, do not be worried, you know, do not fret. It's just your body and your brain protecting you from overwhelm and from, you know, going into extreme emotions. Like, instead of having those extreme emotions, we kind of go into, you know, numbness, like shutdown mode, and it all serves a purpose. But in the end, like, I would say, I mean, birth really, you know, progressed so quickly. I was in and out of the labor room in like 3 hours. Anything else that I did before that time, I think, you know, waking up at 8 and then having birth at like going to the hospital at 3, then, you know, really getting into like active labor, I feel like to me it was quite fast. Pain levels, you know, were really not that extreme. I would say that everything was manageable. You know, obviously there was a point of overwhelm when I got the enema done, but at the same time, you know, I feel like everything went as it should have, and I'm really glad that, you know, we did set our boundaries, we gave them our birth plan, we established what we wanted. Hey! Shh. Hi, Bunny. And all in all, you know, our birth experience was pretty positive. We did, you know, have our natural unmedicated birth, and I would do it all over again. However, maybe at home. That if there was a choice, I would have done that. But, you know, considering everything, we had a pretty good hospital birth. Ooh. What a journey. What a journey. So that's kind of my birth story. I really wanted to share that with you guys. I know that it was kind of extensive and long, but I feel like if I would have, you know, looked into it, I would have wanted to hear multiple different stories, like some positive, some like realistic, or, you know, like what problems you might encounter, and just to prep myself, you know, adequately, which I hope that this video does for you. If there are any questions that you guys have, or you want to connect over, you know, giving birth, or you're pregnant right now, you're not sure, feel free to message me on Instagram or leave a comment down below. 100% subscribe if you want to see more content around motherhood and everything that you need in order to prep for baby, to be with baby, to live this like joyful, conscious life together, to, you know, reconnect or connect with your partner after giving birth, and generally, you know, just how to live like a nice, like intentional life. Subscribe for sure, and I will see you guys in the next video. Love you.